Spicy question.
Yeah.
Do you and Dave have a prenup?
We don't. And I've been waiting for this question because I know your views on it.
Yes.
And it is such a controversial topic because I've broached the subject a few times on social media on stories and people have varying opinions.
Mm-hmm.
But here's my opinion.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to think this is horrible financial advice, and maybe it is. But I think, money to me, money is a lot of things, but it is not everything. And I personally do not believe in prenups unless the...
Sorry, I just choked, guys.
I don't believe in prenups unless there is an extreme division of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Like if there's like family assets to protect generational wealth and everything. Because, and I know I've heard the argument, prenups protect people from a lot of different things and everything. And if you don't get a prenup, the state gives you a prenup. I get all of that. But for me, I just wanted, it's a feeling, and I think I just wanted to feel like this was it. Like getting married was getting a tattoo on my forehead, and there was no way I was going to get divorced from this person. And I know the statistics, but I just wouldn't have married a person who I felt I should get a prenup with and who felt they needed to ask me for a prenup. We're also talking about like Dave and I, even though he was more successful in his career than I was when we first met and was working for a lot longer and had more money, we weren't operating off of like two different of playing fields, So it wasn't like, I totally believe in prenups for people with generational wealth and there's family stuff there. Like you should get a prenup because that's really complicated. We're not really blessed with that.
You're like, our families are poor.
Well, they're not poor, but there's not like a massive trust fund coming to either one of us that maybe there's like siblings going to fight over or whatever, So that's kind of my feeling. And I also think that for those of you listening who are like, oh my God, she's a moron, or hey, that's how I feel. It's like you also have to make a decision and be willing to live with the consequences of your decision. So my decision was not to get, our decision was not to get a prenup. But if in 20 years, in 10 years, we get divorced and I royally get fucked over, I'm accepting that. I'm willing to accept that. And I think that's the thing is like there needs to be a space because I think it's very fiscally and financially sound to get a prenup. There is a space for people who just kind of are maybe romantics like me in a way. And I'm very practical in a lot of ways, but that was just something I felt very strongly about. I did not want a prenup. And Dave really didn't think about it either. And most of our friends, pretty much all of them don't have prenups because it's just sort of like, you know what, we'll just figure it out. And a couple of them are getting divorced. And and it's fine. It sucks, but you just deal with life as it comes. I think you can only prepare for so much. And I wasn't willing to at all even think about the possibility of preparing for divorce. That's why we don't have a prenup.
We can agree to disagree, but I really do appreciate you sharing that because I think that's like a really vulnerable question to answer.
Yeah.
And like,
you know what? My opinion is not the popular take right now too. I think it's much more.
No, I've popularized this take.
I know, which is good, by the way, because I think, look, and nobody knows whether they marry the asshole who's going to take them for everything they're worth, but sometimes you just have to trust your gut. It's a thing that you can't put down on paper, and you know what? We'll figure it out.
Yeah. In 60 years when you're like old and gray and you've never ever needed one, like it'll be perfect. You'll look back on this moment and you'll be like, told you so.
Yeah, but if not, I can live with the consequences. And I think that's the important thing.
I think that is important.
Whatever you do, make sure you're willing to accept the reality if it hits you.
Yes, I think that's really, really good in terms of advice. I want another piece.
Yeah.
What is the best piece of dating advice you've ever gotten? And then I also want to know what's the best piece of money advice you've ever gotten?
The best piece of dating advice I ever got was from my parents, and they said, find the man who does the right thing, which sounds like very simple and ambiguous, but what they meant was don't marry the man who's the fun guy, who's the cool guy necessarily.
No, I don't want that.
Not that I'm saying Dave is not fun or cool, but find the man who does the right thing when the right thing is not the easy thing to do. So, and I look at Dave and the way he works and his work ethic and how he gets up every morning and, he runs and all this stuff. And I'm just like, that's so difficult because that's not the easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And honestly, being with me is not always a walk in the park. I say
that too.
Yeah. I am quite a trip sometimes. And he always does the right thing. And that's why we have this marriage because, there is sort of this shared ideal of like, life isn't always going to be easy, but like our marriage doesn't have to be difficult. Life is hard. I don't think our marriage is hard because we both just want the best for each other. We're a partnership. So, but that's because I found the guy who did the right thing. If you find a guy who, when shit hits the fan, wants to go party with his boys and, cheat on you, that's the easy thing to do in a lot of situations. And I think that's why a lot of relationships fail is because people marry who's fun. They don't marry who is going to do the right thing. So the best piece of financial advice I ever got was from my mom. Invest in the S&P early on.
Yes, Mama.
Any tiny bit of money I had in my 20s when I started making money, I set aside a certain percentage and I put it into the S&P. And that's done quite well. And it's, by the way, like it's investing for dummies. I am not a good investor. I don't want to pick stocks. I don't really want to spend the time to think about it. So the S&P 500, there we go.
You say, I'm an investing dummy. The fact that you're doing that, you're not an investing dummy. You are, in fact, an investing genius because your returns are likely beating some of the top hedge funds.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to cherry pick. They're trying to do like the perfect investment.
Right.
I'm telling you as someone who worked on the street, we got calls week after week that funds were blowing up because they made the wrong call.
Yeah.
People with billions of dollars of tech don't get it right. So
no, and my parents do not really believe in financial advisors, which is a very Chinese thing.
That's so Chinese.
It's just to not believe anybody, right?
They're all scammers, by the way.
Everybody is like, everybody is out. They don't believe doctors. They don't believe financial advisors. They don't believe, everybody's out to get them. So my parents, obviously, my mom taught herself how to invest because when they finally started having enough money to invest, she was like, we got to figure this out because other people are retiring. At the rate we're going, we're never going to retire. But I have looked at my investments versus Dave is in the S&P, but he's also has a pretty diverse portfolio because he does pick his own stocks and he has a few other individual funds like small cap and all that stuff. And my S&P's done better than him. Now, look, there's still a long leeway to go. So that's not to say that his investments couldn't do better than mine in the future. But it's been I don't know. I'm like, honey, it's been 10 years of you being in this fund. Like, maybe you should just cash out and go into the S&P.
Like me.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Make it easy.
Yeah, make it easy. Speaking of easy, this is not an easy conversation. But when did you guys first talk about money and how do you guys split expenses?
We don't really split expenses. It's all one big fungible pot. I think the first thing that came up for us was, I think I just asked him, I was like, how much do you make? This is like a year into our relationship.
You and I both have no net in between the brain and the lips.
Yeah, I was like, whatever. I mean, we've been along long enough, and we should figure. And he didn't know how much I made, so I was like, we should have this conversation. It was like a random Friday night. It was actually on Cape Cod. I think I remember. We did not have our own house. We were there visiting his parents, and we went out to dinner, the two of us. And I just remember saying, "How much do you make?" And it's actually a lot more than I thought because he literally lived like a pauper for 9. He was in the same rent stabilized apartment in New York City for 9 years. Genius. But also the place needed a little. Okay, so let me just explain this apartment to you. When he shut the door, some drywall plaster would fall onto his couch every time. So before
the asbestos dust.
Yes. So he would need to vacuum up that on his couch before sitting down. The toilet, for some reason, would only flush if you held the handle down for 10 seconds. It was rough, but he saved a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I just always assumed that, because New York women, you kind of figure out, okay, if he's paying for this apartment, this is probably how much he's making.
Yeah.
I was like, this guy probably doesn't make that much, but it's okay. He's trying. I could see the effort, and I knew he did well enough, right?
Yeah.
And then he told me, and I was like, what the fuck are you doing in there? You know?
In your asbestos apartment.
In your asbestos apartment. He's like, I'm happy, I'm good. He's just so low maintenance, right?
Yeah.
He's so low key. And so that was the first conversation. Then he asked me how much I made, and he was like, oh yeah, you make around what I thought you made.
So your radar was off, but his radar was spot on.
His radar was spot on. Yes. I spent money the way that probably what somebody who's making $120,000 at 27 would spend. And he honestly, like, he could probably go back to that apartment right now and be happy and just save and invest and whatever. So that was the first conversation. And it's honestly never really been a huge conversation because for some reason, we're just kind of on the same wavelength. We don't have a combined account per se, but we just have access to everyone's funds. Like for some reason, because I'm an independent contractor and he's a W-2 employee, but we're married. We're legally married.
That's sweet, sweet health insurance.
I know, right? That is.
How do you think I have health insurance? I am on my husband's.
Yes, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so much better than anything we could pay for ourselves.
No, without a doubt.
It's insane. So he pays for a portion of my taxes technically because we pay estimated taxes, whereas the W-2, it goes, you pay taxes as you go along. So he's paying like now pretty sizable estimated taxes for me. And there's never any kind of weirdness around, oh, I paid for this, I paid for that.
Yeah.
It was always just sort of this tacit understanding that this is all one fungible pot of funds for us.